Once a material has been applied to a scene, the sample slot that material occupied in the material editor can be cleared off in preparation for making another material. And that pretty much allows you to build as many materials as your scene may need, not being limited to the maximum 24 sample slots that the editor offers. But in clearing a particular material out of the editor, what then happens in a situation where you'd like to go back and maybe change something about that no longer available skin? Well, being that the material editor is the only place that those additional edits can be made, there's got to be a way to be able to pull a material back out of a scene. Here's how that's done. I'm using a file named Retrieving Materials. Let's begin by first opening the material editor and clearing out the currently applied materials that we have in it. I'll tap M on the keyboard, then drag a gray ball on top of each colored material. Now, the fact that the materials have not changed within our viewports gives us direct evidence that once a material has been applied to the scene, it no longer has to stay within the editor. But now that we've cleared things out, what's the trick to getting a material out of the scene and back in a place where we can work on it? You actually have a couple of options, all depending on how easy it is to get a clear shot of the object you're trying to get the material off of. In the case of the green torus knot, because we can easily see it in the scene, we can use the eyedropper. It's located below the horizontal row of icons. Now click that button and move your mouse into the view. You'll notice the cursor now looks like an eyedropper with a white tip. Watch that white tip fill up when you pull your mouse down to the green surface. Now go ahead and click. That brings the material back in the editor where it can now be changed around. In situations where it's a little more difficult to use the eyedropper, like accessing the material on the inside sphere, you can instead locate the materials in the scene from a list that you can select from. You can get to that list by clicking on the Get Material button on the left-hand side of the horizontal icons. When you do so, the Material Map Browser will open. Now, if you look in the upper left-hand corner of that dialog, you'll see a category called Browse From. Now, think about what you're doing. You're wanting to get a material out of something or somewhere that you can browse from. Which of these options makes the most sense? I think you'll agree the choice should be seen, so go ahead and click on it. Now, what you see on the right-hand side of the dialog are two blue spheres. Those spheres represent the materials that you have in your scene. Single-clicking on either of those two spheres will bring up a thumbnail version of that material in the upper left-hand corner. You also have a couple different options as to the way the materials display. In order to now get that material back in the materials editor, you can either drag it over to a sample slot or simply double-click. With it now in place, its color can be changed around. Now, the Browse From Scene option works fine and dandy when you only have a couple objects in your scene. But what would you do in a situation when you had maybe 50 to 100 different objects? That list is going to get long and a little bit difficult to navigate around. In a situation like that, I'd suggest selecting the object in the scene that you want to get the material off of. Let's click on the torus knot. Then change the Browse From selection from Scene over to Selected. The list on the right will now only include whatever objects you have selected in your view. Now I'll get the material back in the editor and make a few changes. So, all depending on what works best, you now have a couple different options as far as retrieving a material out of a scene.